Funding for this program was provided by the Annenberg CPB project.
It's tough finding ways to beat the heat on summer days like this. And that's good, if you're in the ice cream business. This isn't going to be easy. Here's one I haven't tried.
What would you like, sir?
Give me a scoop of rum cherry trifle. That's what I call an exotic flavor. This is great. I don't know how they do it. Well, I can guess. Let's see. Cream, sugar, cherries, maybe a little rum. But the exact recipe is a trade secret, and a closely guarded one at that. The special formula for all the flavors is tucked safely away inside a computer. Like most important secrets, it's got to be protected. And listen, if you're concerned about the security of this cone, don't give it a second thought. I'm going to protect it all the way home.
Recently, computer use has expanded in a variety of settings and at an amazing rate. The benefits of computerization are clear, but so are the hazards. Beyond the light of technological advance lies a darker potential for abuse.
At first, there were so few people that knew how to use computers. There were not many people that were breaking into computer systems and either stealing money or records or what have you. But as more people have learned how to use computers, more of them are getting into the files.
Computer crime is on the rise. Some say it's an epidemic. Conservative estimates put the cost of such crime at hundreds of millions of dollars per year. And these figures don't include numerous cases that go undetected or unreported. Many organizations are reluctant to disclose computer crimes, fearing loss of public trust and confidence.
Everybody has a common conception of what a criminal is, ranging from a slick con artist to a street thug. Most people don't think of criminals as being model employees, as being quiet and studious, as being shy. But in fact, some research that's been done by Don Parker on individuals who have been convicted of crimes involving computers shows that those individuals were, in many cases, model employees, the kind that their managers would like to have 10 more of before they found out that they were criminals. They were people who were often family people, never had been involved in crimes of any kind before, first offenders in every sense of the word, and yet they were committing these crimes. Why is that? Well, one of the reasons is the stakes can be very high. Having these systems in operation and exposing people to the temptation of very big gains for doing something that's very much like what they do from day to day.
That kind of crime is a type of white-collar crime. An example of that has already occurred where, I guess the biggest example of it is where I think somebody was indicted for having swindled $50 million from a bank simply by rounding numbers down, and what he did was pocket the change by creating a new little bank account for himself. And that's a very interesting way to deal with numbers.
Let's suppose that you developed a system that's just sort of siphoned off $100 million and did something with it. Doesn't really even matter what. The scale of that problem for the financial institutions is so much greater than a $10,000 heist from a local branch bank. This could send the entire financial community into an uproar.
That might be viewed as something glorious and something to be looked upon as a kind of a heroic effort. I would submit, however, that that heroic view is only a short-lived phenomenon based upon the fact that the newness of the whole era of computers used in industry and in society will soon pass away. That may be kind of a glory analogous to perhaps to Jesse James when he first robbed the bank. But when it's your bank or my bank, and when people begin to get really hurt by all of this in a large way, I don't think it'll be funny anymore.
At one time, computer crimes were viewed by most people as harmless pranks, a kind of David versus Goliath slap at big business. But as these electronic intrusions become increasingly common, it's clear that they are serious and potentially very destructive, and that the perpetrators are, in fact, criminals.
Fraud and other crimes with respect to data processing are very interesting. The crimes are essentially the same old crimes we've always had. Thefts and convincing people to give you things under false pretenses and so forth. But it's the method that's changed.
With computer systems, you can do things very, very quickly. If you have them set up right, you can have your fraud sort of buried in the background and then just trigger with one command, for example, if it's sort of buried in software system someplace. And then suddenly the deal goes down and maybe nobody's the wiser for a couple of days, but by that time you're long gone. Okay, when somebody stole $10 million from the Security Pacific Bank a few years ago, electronic funds transfer system using computers played a role in that system. A key factor was the speed with which he was able to execute this rather daring crime. So that just gives you an example of how computers make a difference.
Metropolitan newspapers these days are filled with detailed accounts of computer crimes. At a large storage facility, a clerk entered false information into a computerized inventory system to cover up inventory theft. The value of the merchandise stolen was placed at $4 million. A London bank officer used the bank's computer to steal $290,000 from an inactive customer account. A claims reviewer with an insurance company prepared false claims payable to friends. The claims, totaling $128,000, were paid automatically by the company's computer. Broadly defined, computer-related crime is not just a single type of crime, but many. It encompasses a range of illegal activities: theft, fraud, embezzlement, invasion of privacy, trespassing. Unfortunately, legal statutes created to deal with traditional crime are inadequate for coping with high-tech infractions. Although new and better legislation is being enacted, laws alone are not enough. The ultimate solution to computer crime is better data security.
Security is a very important issue to both the large corporation as well as the small business. Of course, our considerations are different. We learned years ago, back in the 1960s, when computers were just coming out in force in the business world, it was a symbol of status. What they would do is put them out in front for everybody to see with big glass panes. Well, what happened was that it was easy to have an accident in there, vandalism. Some of the riots of the 60s gave them some problems on some campuses. During the riots, people were known to throw chairs through the plate glass and then completely destroy the systems. Well, very quickly, the computers became too important to a business, to an organization, for it to have that kind of easy destruction.
Effective prevention and detection techniques are important because they can intervene before a system has been compromised and a loss incurred. As the first line of defense, physical security protects against unauthorized access to the data center itself. Card key locks, alarm systems, security guards, and closed-circuit television screen individuals who attempt to enter the data center. Only those individuals who have been given clearance are allowed inside.
Each of our employees, on the day he starts to work, is issued a plastic access control card, which activates a door that he can enter depending upon his job duties. And we do not, for example, allow programmers into the computer room because their duties do not require them to be there.
Physically, we keep the computer room in an area where it can't be viewed by other people. It's in a basement. And that's just, we just do normal common sense security where the doors are locked and you have to have special security through a card entry system. That card entry system, in order to get approval, it has to be approved by me and by the director of security for the company.
As a second line of defense, programmed access controls are built right into system hardware or software to protect system resources. Password controls, sometimes referred to as locks or keys, are used to identify potential users.
When I arrive in the morning, I turn on this terminal and I log on to a computer which is located in another building. To do that, I have to type my name. Then the computer asks me to furnish a password which uniquely identifies me. And that's a secret between me and the computer so that an imposter can't come and use my resources and ruin the stuff that I have on my machine.
Once you have physical security for the system, you can begin to implement logical levels of security, which are basically building fences around the resources of the system. In NCR systems, we build those fences by controlling who can start up a system. Once the system is started up, through an interactive dialogue with the user, we establish whether the user is permitted to use the system, and we convince him, too, that the system is the system he thinks he's using. We identify the user based on a subject ID and ask the question, is he allowed to access this resource? And what kinds of rights does he have over this resource? Then, depending on whether he passes that test, he's cleared all the hurdles, and we give him that resource.
We use a software protection system similar to that used by many other companies that controls the access to data on the basis of authorization. We determine in advance for any program or any data file who is authorized to access it and what type of access is permitted. This is all controlled through software and through ID and password protection.
What we find organizations doing then is focusing on creating what we call corporate databases, in which these central repositories of data will contain all the information required by the corporation to exist as a business entity. If the engineering department who owns the engineering information has need of it, they will have access to it. They will have updating capabilities. But if the marketing people need information from the engineering database, they would probably only have access to that information, not update capabilities.
Access controls are not confined to a select group of industrial giants. They've become a common part of everyday life, particularly for those who use automated teller machines to do their banking.
They vary, but they have built-in mechanisms so that if we're making mistakes, one after another will be turned off. Or in some systems, the card will actually be retained by the system. We don't even get it back. At the same time, there may be pictures taken of us attempting this so that there's some evidence later on who was doing it. This is one level of access control. Another is that in order to perform certain functions, you can't do it from a particular terminal. Now, from my automated teller machine in the outdoor of the bank, I can't do some changes to master accounts and so forth. And so there are two controls that are in place.
A series of instructions are often built into the operating system of a computer to monitor consistency and accuracy in processing. Although these system checks aren't designed to counter criminals, they can perform such functions. A company's overall policies and operating procedures play a key role in computer security. the most technologically sophisticated system in the world is only as effective as the people who use it. All security systems depend on users who care about security. Job applicants must be carefully screened, areas of responsibility separated, and controls established to audit or examine each phase of the operation.
At the Los Angeles Times, we get audited twice a year, one by our internal auditors and one by an outside auditor that's hired by the company. And each one of them look at security for everything. For our payroll, for our text, for our subscribers, for our invoicing, everything is audited.
We want to have adequate audit trails so that we can follow a transaction forwards and backwards through the system. We want to be able to control all inputs into the system. We want to be able to control all changes to programs. We want to be able to monitor any exception conditions that take place. So I think the role of the EDP auditor will be a growing one and should make a very significant contribution.
By examining an organization in depth, audits protect against a variety of dangers, including computer crimes.
Why don't you just go into the load
Practical considerations sometimes limit the scope and effectiveness of any security system. Cost is a big factor, especially in the business world. System complexity is another. The goal is to create systems that are secure and user-friendly.
The quantity on hand is correct if you've been.
I can make a system that's absolutely secure, but is also absolutely unusable. So the person who designs a security system must balance off the user's ability to get done what he needs to get done with his desire to help the user protect himself or to protect his data from other people. Many systems that have been designed in the past have really enforced a security policy onto the user of the system. That's absolutely backwards. The security of a system, the policy for that security, must be controlled by the user. He's the only one that really has the information that is needed to make sure that people who have to get work done can get work done and can balance that need against his need to protect his installation and his system.
The security issue is a very curious one because back in the old days we used to keep files and folders in file cabinets. And probably far more of them were stolen than were ever stolen by computer. If you wanted to know something about somebody, you wandered down to the personnel department and went over the file and went looking for his name. And you probably got it. There was no protection whatsoever, no security. Actually, there's a great deal more security once you put it into computers, because they've got to know which computer system and what program and everything else before they can get in there. Now, actually, there was theft and fraud and all of these things long before there was ever a computer, and probably a great deal more of it than there is by computer. We've also become more conscious of personal information, and we have laws that say it must be protected. Back in the old days, there was no more protection on that than jumping over the moon. You could walk out in those file cabinets and get anything you wanted on anybody. Now you've got to know the way it's filed and the code to call it and everything like that.
We feel today that if you pay proper attention to physical controls and protection, if you pay proper attention to audits and controls, and if you employ keys, interlocks, badges, passwords, access control software on an intelligent basis commensurate with your application need, you can do a great deal to make your computer installation very, very safe, probably safer than any other form of record keeping.
In recent years, there's been an expansion of computer networks on a global scale, and an increase in the quantity of vital or sensitive data being sent over data communication channels. As a result, security in transit has become an increasingly important issue. One widely accepted means of protecting data during transmission is to encode it. The protection of sensitive data in this manner is called encryption.
What a data encryption technique does is allow you to put that information in an unintelligible form while it's being transmitted and until it reaches a user that you want to allow to read it. At that point, through the use of a data encryption technique, that user and that user alone can decrypt it and the information becomes intelligible to him.
Computers are vulnerable to a wide variety of problems, ranging from accidents to malicious mischief to civil unrest, vandalism, and sabotage. And there are natural threats, floods, fires, and earthquakes, just to name a few. Even if there's no damage to the processing center itself, an interruption in the flow of data can be devastating.
Businesses are becoming more and more dependent on technology for their very survival in the commercial environment. And as this becomes more and more true, it is more important that their systems be up 100% of the time.
Computing is so important to Ralph's and so integrated into the functioning of the business that as an ongoing business we simply cannot do. We cannot function without our equipment. As an example, if we lose our equipment for more than 2 hours, our costs begin to mount up at a rate of in excess of $15,000 per hour in overtime in our warehouses and our stores. As a consequence, we're vitally concerned about keeping the machines going.
Accidents and natural disasters pose a very real threat to computer operations. As with computer crime, however, there are ways to prevent this from happening. Computers require a carefully controlled environment for normal functioning. Even seemingly minor disruptions can wreak havoc. Room temperature, humidity, and air purity must be monitored and controlled. Water detectors, as well as burglar, smoke, and fire alarms should be considered standard equipment. And in case of floods, raised flooring and backup power supplies add to the security of the safety net.
This data center is protected by its own internal power systems that automatically take over. The basic way that system operates is that there are batteries that float on the communication, on the power lines at all times to more or less smooth out the influx in power coming from the commercial power supplier. And if the commercial power is shut off, those batteries will carry on for 20 minutes or so. And then generators automatically start up to take over the load, and they do have the capability for running the whole data center for extended periods of time without ever having to rely on outside.
Common sense tells us that it's a good idea to back up all vital processing systems. This may be the only way to guarantee that whenever a problem arises, processing can continue. Standard backup procedure involves making and storing copies of all valuable programs and data.
Each day we send outside for storage in a secure location a copy of all critical data that was generated that day. And in the event that a disaster occurred, we have a recovery program that we maintain in an up-to-date fashion and rehearse every quarter that would make use of that data, and the programs as well are stored off-site. And we would go to a backup site that we have identified where we have a contract, and we would be able to do our processing at that backup site. We could probably be operational at another location in less than 24 hours if our computer center here were totally destroyed.
Despite best efforts, unavoidable disasters can and do occur. That's where recovery and contingency planning come into play. The most elaborate contingency plans include the creation of a recovery organization. In the event of a major disaster, pre-established teams would handle specific disaster functions.
When we talk about contingency planning, we're talking about having a plan formulated that spells out specifically who will do what before, during, and after a disaster. And in order to be able to recover from a disaster, one would need a backup computer site, one that is compatible both hardware and software-wise, and one that is available under a legally binding agreement. And this is the kind of site that must be available to us within a certain time span.
As we come to depend more and more on computer technology, the protection of computer resources has become critical for a wide variety of organizations. Banks, hospitals, airlines. The need for computer security touches nearly all facets of society. In government, in businesses large and small, organizations both public and private, from multinational corporations to private individuals.
I think we're becoming a lot more conscious about data security. I know I became very conscious of it just yesterday. I was using my computer in my home, and I had an electrician in working on a burned out circuit in the house. And I suddenly lost power in computer and lost a letter that I was typing. So that made me conscious of security. And you spill a cup of coffee, perhaps, on a computer tape a computer disk that you've just produced, that makes you conscious of computer security.
No matter how automated security measures may become, they can never fully replace security-conscious personnel.
Fire emergency.
It's especially vital that we as individuals and as a society become aware of basic security concepts and issues. No system anywhere can be absolutely invulnerable. But as our dependency on computers continues to grow, so must our efforts to improve computer security.
Please excuse the mess. I'm trying to recreate the recipe for rum cherry trifle on my own. You know, I've tried dozens of flavor combinations, but I just haven't found the right one yet. Not even close. Even though this may look like a lot of fun, it's actually a lot of hard work. You know, there is one surefire way to get this right. Works every time.
Funding for this program was provided by the Annenberg CPB project.
The New Literacy was made possible through funds made available by Cuyahoga Community College and Lorain County Community College.
WVIV TV 25, Cleveland.
AM weather is made possible by grants from the Federal Aviation Administration, Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association, AOPA Air Safety Foundation, Phillips Petroleum Company, and the National Business Aircraft Association. Additional production grants have been provided by Hilton Hotels Corporation, United States Aircraft Insurance Group, the Gorman-Rupp Company, Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, Combs Gates, and the Lawyer Pilots Bar Association.
TGIF on this March 8th, 1985. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to AM Weather. I'm Carl Weiss.
And I'm Wayne Winston. Of course, on this Friday morning, we'll be looking at all the details on the weekend weather from coast to coast, border to border. That'll be coming along in just a couple of minutes. And Carl, out in the western states, they're getting a little respite from that wintry weather, but it's just that, a respite.
Not for long. It looks like more snow and rain will move into California during the course of the weekend. But first things first, the big storm that dumped all the heavy snow over the Sierras came to an end on Thursday. But since Monday, northern California, that's near Donner Pass, picked up almost 5 feet of snow, more than 100 inches on the ground already. Pretty much quiet weather throughout most of California early on this Friday. Some lingering light snow is falling over parts of Oregon and southeastern Idaho. Moving into the southwestern part of the nation, some cloud cover, but not much in the way of any rain or snow. But strong southerly winds through the plain states yesterday brought temperatures into the 60s as far north as Kansas, and wind gusts to more than 40 miles per hour. That clocked both at Goodland and Lubbock, Texas. Strong gale force winds as well in advance of a frontal system over the Great Lakes states yesterday. And we do have some rain, sleet, and freezing snow moving into the northeastern part of the nation. This could make driving there slick this morning. And this same area of precipitation brought bad driving weather to parts of the Midwest early on Thursday. Moving southward down toward the Gulf Coast, patches of dense fog have taken over, restricting visibilities and bringing some tough driving weather to parts of the southeast and mostly along the western Gulf Coast. Temperatures around the nation as of 5 o'clock this morning, Eastern Time, range from 74 degrees at Key West and Homestead in Florida to -8. Very cold over Yellowstone Park and Big Piney in western Wyoming. That's the way things check out early on this Friday morning. And Wayne, with our satellite view, once again, we'll be able to see that the west isn't out of the woods yet.
All right, we'll be able to look offshore, see where this next round of wet and snowy weather is coming from. Yesterday morning, if you recall, they were having some rain and snow out in the western states, but that rather quickly evaporated during the day. First, however, let's look at the situation over the south and east, and you'll notice this long band of clouds extends from the southwestern to the northeastern part of the country. Plenty of moisture in the atmosphere here. And this morning we find a long band of light to moderate rain extending from the mid-Mississippi Valley northeastward. Now here's that storm that we had out over the west yesterday. It moved inland though, and it breaks up, and you can see it almost disappears from view as it moves eastward and out into the plain states by early this morning. Now a close-up view over the western part of the country and out over the Pacific, and here we see our next storm system. This is this comma-shaped area of clouds which is sitting off the California coast. Well, that will be moving eastward here during the next 48 hours, and as it does so, it also looks like it might tap some of the moisture out of this broad band of clouds down to the southwest, so it will make it just all the more wetter as it does move on inland. Let's look at our latest satellite picture. This is the enhanced view from 5:30 this morning, Eastern Time. This smudge of clouds out over Nebraska is just what is left of that storm system that moved out of the west during the day yesterday, and this broad band of high clouds we noted, and it sort of gives you the idea of the wind flow across the country as well, which is almost due west to east. Let's look at the radar map now. out over the western part of the country. Radar not detecting anything. As you move eastward, though, few snow showers out here in the Nebraska Panhandle. And then as we saw on the satellite picture with that long, broad band of clouds from the southwest to the northeast, we start picking up the rain and showers in the eastern part of Kansas. It runs through the Ohio Valley into the northeastern part of the country, where it becomes mixed with a variety of freezing precipitation as well. Tops as high as 20,000 feet here in the southern part of New England. For our radar picture, we'll head down to southeastern Pennsylvania, the National Weather Service radar station at Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. We see what is mostly light and moderate rain moving over most of Pennsylvania, northern Maryland into New Jersey. What appears to be the absence of rain in the central part of Pennsylvania, actually just the radar shadow from the mountains. Carl?
We've been telling you about mild weather for most of the southern plain states. Well, it looks as though most of the southern one half of the nation will enjoy the mild weather for this Friday. Highs mainly in the 60s from central California eastward to the Chesapeake and Delaware Bays. Milder 70s from southern California into the Carolinas, and there'll be some 80s for extreme southern Arizona, southern and southwestern parts of Texas, as well as most of central Florida. Moving up into the northwestern part of the country, cooler weather there, 40s and 50s, with 30s for highs over northern Maine. Now low temperatures by Saturday morning will dip into the teens and 20s in the west as far south as the higher elevations of northern Arizona, and we'll have more teens and 20s moving into the Great Lakes and parts of the northeast. 40s as far north as St. Louis, but once again we'll have the mildest weather over southern Texas and Florida, with lows there mainly in the 60s and the lower 70s. Wayne?
Now we'll take a look at the details on the ways of the weather during the course of the weekend. And first, our map for this evening. Now we still will have a band of scattered light shower activity along our front. That will extend from Arkansas eastward into the mid-Atlantic region. Most of the rest of the country will be dry, however. The first of that rain starting to move onshore in central and northern California by this evening. Now, looking at the map for tomorrow morning, we see that storm system pressing eastward along the coast, rain at the lower elevations, the snow at the highest elevations through the Sierra Nevada mountains. Elsewhere, mostly dry, perhaps a few lingering showers in the vicinity of that front, however. Looking ahead to Sunday morning, out west, it's a rainy, snowy picture, although a lot of warm air, it looks like, will be coming in with this low-pressure system, so the snow will be confined generally to the very highest elevations. But for the rest of the country, from the Rockies and eastward to the East Coast, looks like a good day with generally fair skies, perhaps just a few leftover showers or a bit of light rain in northern Florida. Finally, on Monday morning, out west, we've still got some rain and snow showers from the central Rockies and through the southern plateau, perhaps a few sprinkles in the far northwestern part of the country, as well as the upper Great Lakes, but for the most part, dry, fair weather. Carl?
Pilots, if this spring-like weather gets your flying juices going, well, that's fine, but please don't take off until you get a pre-flight briefing from either your local flight service station or local National Weather Service office. Let's take a look at what kind of weather you can expect if you're going up early on this Friday morning, and we have MVFR and IFR ceilings and visibilities from the northeast back into the Great Lakes. This is due mainly to the low clouds, snow, rain, freezing rain, and sleet. Low clouds, showers, and even a few thunderstorms as we move westward into the central and southern plains. Patches of dense fog blankets the southeast and central and western Gulf Coast, and a few spots of light snow throughout the west. Icing this morning, well, there'll be some occasional moderate mixed and rime icing from the northeast back through the southern plain states from 24,000 down to 5,000 feet. And through the plateau and parts of the west coast, we expect some occasional moderate rime and mixed icing from 3,000 up to around 15,000 feet. Now looking at turbulence, the frontal system through the eastern and central part of the nation will have some low-level turbulence, moderate up to 12,000 feet, while the northern plains will have some jet stream turbulence from 15,000 up to 25,000 feet, and that too will be moderate. Then for the evening hours, expect MVFR weather from the St. Lawrence River Valley southward through the Appalachians, and that'll be low clouds, a few showers, a few more patches of showers down over the southern plains. There'll be some low clouds as well for the eastern Gulf Coast, and that next storm will be moving into central and northern California with MVFR ceilings and visibilities. Our turbulence for the evening hours with the storm in California, expect moderate bumps there up to 10,000 feet. Over the northern lakes, jet stream turbulence, moderate, 20,000 to 30,000 feet, and the low-level turbulence once again, this time just in the northeast. And then for you early birds on Saturday morning, the fog will reform across much of the south and the Gulf Coast. A few areas with IFR weather expected. Elsewhere, mostly VFR weather from coast to coast, except for California. With the front moving onshore, there'll be more MVFR weather for the central and northern parts of the state. Looking at turbulence for Saturday morning, Maine will have some low-level turbulence, moderate to 8,000 feet, and still moderate turbulence up to 18,000 feet for parts of the west and the Great Basin. Coming up next, we have winds aloft, and Wayne starts them at 2,000 feet above ground level.
We can see at the low level we do have a southerly wind flow out of the Gulf of Mexico, a lot of moisture, fog along the Gulf Coast and feeding moisture into that band of rain that we see through the Ohio Valley northeastward. Winds light and variable over the southwestern part of the country, stronger in the northeast and the shaded area, 25 knots or a bit stronger. At 10,000 feet, we find the light winds over the western part of the country from the plains eastward, generally in excess of 25 knots, with 50 to 100 knot winds at 10,000 feet from Indiana eastward into southern New England, the mid-Atlantic coast. At 18,000 feet, here again we find the strongest winds between 50 and 100 knots from the central Rockies through the Middle West and into the northeastern part of the country. We'll go up to 34,000 feet. We see the pattern that we were looking at on the satellite picture with that almost west to east flow. It does have sort of a southwesterly component towards the northeast. That broad band of winds across the country with 100 to 150 knot winds in a band from the Four Corners through the upper Midwest and into the Northeast. Now it's time for Weather Watch, and here again is Carl.
As we close out this week, we find 3 spots along the eastern seaboard where small craft advisories are flying. The first is from Eastport, Maine, down to Merrimack River, Massachusetts. Southwest winds will shift into the west by afternoon at speeds 15 to 30 knots with seas 3 to 5 feet. More small craft advisories extend from Manasquan, New Jersey down to Chincoteague, Virginia, and for the waters of northern Chesapeake Bay and Delaware Bay. Southwest, then west and northwest winds 15 to 25 knots with seas 1 to 4 feet. Down along the Florida East Coast, small craft advisories are up from St. Augustine southward, including the Keys, and up the Gulf Coast over to Tarpon Springs. East and northeast winds will be around 20 knots with waves 4 to 8 feet. Now, those same strong east winds have also prompted a coastal flood watch for much of Florida's Atlantic coast. Tides will be up to 2 feet higher than normal, with some coastal flooding around the time of high tide. Finally, for Florida, east central parts of the state have lake wind advisories issued. These are for east and northeast winds 15 to 25 miles per hour with some stronger gusts. Now, moving out to the western Gulf Coast, morning travelers advisories for fog have been issued from Lake Charles westward through Port Arthur, Houston, Victoria, Corpus Christi, and the coastal bend of Texas. As well as for southern Texas, they also have lake wind advisories posted. These are for southeast winds at speeds 15 to 25 miles per hour. Out west, all the winter storm warnings are down for California, at least for now, but along the coast, the National Weather Service has issued small craft advisories from Point St. George down to Monterey Bay. South and southeast winds will increase to 25 knots by afternoon, with ocean swells as high as 12 feet. Well, that's it for AM weather for this Friday and for this week. We hope you have just a super weekend. Thank you for joining us, and we'll be looking for you again right here come Monday morning.
AM weather is made possible by grants from the Federal Aviation Administration, Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association, AOPA Air Safety Foundation, Phillips Petroleum Company, and the National Business Aircraft Association. Additional production grants have been provided by Hilton Hotels Corporation, United States Aircraft Insurance Group, the Gorman-Rupp Company, Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, Combs Gates, and the Lawyer Pilots Bar Association.